Hello, my name is Amanda Pollack, and I am the Visual Information Specialist for the National Park Service's National Underground Railroad Network to Freedom program, and welcome to our 4th episode of the Ranger Roadshow. Our job at the Network to Freedom is a little bit different than the average park ranger. Our job is to work with people, both inside and outside of the National Park Service, to preserve and share verifiable stories about the Underground Railroad. As some of you know, we're in the middle of a virtual road trip across the country, visiting sites, programs, and facilities along the Network to Freedom, meeting Network to Freedom members, and learning more about the impact of the Underground Railroad in the world around us. On today's episode of the Ranger Roadshow, we are headed to Petersburg National Battlefield, specifically to Appomattox Plantation, a site on the Network to Freedom. Appomattox Plantation, also known as the Richard Eppes Plantation, is located on what we know today as the U.S. Grant Headquarters at City Point. Many are familiar with the significance of this location to the battlefield operations at Petersburg, but this space also holds an important connection with the Underground Railroad, which Ranger Emmanuel Dabney will tell us about in just a moment. Today, Appomattox Plantation is owned and managed by Petersburg National Battlefield, and thus by the National Park Service. Due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus, operations might be limited. Prior to visiting, please check out the park's website, www.nps.gov/PETE, for more information on park operations. Without further ado, let's travel to City Point, Virginia, where we will meet up with Emmanuel to learn more about the Underground Railroad's impact within the bounds of Petersburg National Battlefield.
Thanks, Amanda. Hi, my name is Emmanuel Dabney. I'm the museum curator here at Petersburg National Battlefield. Today, I'm going to share with you a story about freedom, or at least the hopes therein, and those freedoms that are dashed in the era of slavery. The Grant's headquarters at City Point Unit here at Petersburg National Battlefield is best known as being the Civil War headquarters of Ulysses S. Grant when he was Lieutenant General commanding the armies of the United States in 1864 and 1865. However, he never would have come here had it not been for the institution of slavery. And at our site, we have a place that really highlights the breadth and depth of the institution of slavery, including the desires of people who wanted to be free, and how the institution of slavery, through laws and people and the combined actions of the two, dashed dreams for many enslaved blacks prior to the end of slavery in 1865. Today we are standing in the 1840 kitchen laundry building, an original structure here on this plantation. This building's plaster walls and wood floors, silent now, but would have been busy in its historic period. Standing beside me, we have represented Sarah Caldwell. She is the only enslaved laundress whose name we know from the historic records of the Eppes family who owned this plantation prior to the Civil War, and indeed dating back to before the American Revolution. Sarah came here, sold in 1856, when she was 22 years old. She was at the time pregnant. The man who sold her, a slave trader in Petersburg, Virginia, only about 9 miles from this site, advertised her as being an excellent washer and ironer. Otherwise, there was nothing else described about her, including the fact that she was pregnant. However, she must have been very good at her job and had learned those skills from someone, perhaps family, perhaps others, as she sold for $1,100, the equivalent in today's 2021 money of more than $20,000. Sarah was too pregnant to even leave from where she had been sold, and she remained in Petersburg until she gave birth to a daughter, who she later named Elnora. Here she began her work, cleaning clothing, linens, napkins, for Richard Eppes, the then owner of this plantation, his second wife, Elizabeth, and their growing family. Not to mention, whenever guests came, their laundry as well. But Sarah must have known someone to have this baby with, and it appears that her husband's name was William, perhaps also the father of her child. William was in a unique situation to our thinkers or our modern day thinking today about how slavery operated. He was owned by another individual, Oliver Hamilton, who lived in Chesterfield County, Virginia, a county that lay between Petersburg and Richmond, Virginia. Hamilton hired out William to a tobacco factory in Petersburg. There he worked making tobacco into a sellable product for the tobacco industry to continue its booming trade as it was in the 1850s. Through this hired out labor, enslaved people were able to earn extra money, particularly in industrialized work like in the tobacco factories. And what people did with that money was often try to find a little bit extra food, a little bit of extra clothing, finding their own places to stay for rent, but sometimes fulfilling other desires. Not 2 years after Sarah was sold, William joined others in striking a blow for their own freedom. In the spring of 1858, just as Virginia's temperature was getting warmer, as it is prone to do in May, Gilbert and Sarah, owned by a hotel operator in Petersburg, John Bull, owned by a miller in Petersburg, Joseph Mayo, owned by a racetrack owner and plantation owner, Otway Hare, whose property also lay within another portion of Petersburg National Battlefield, and William, made their way down to the harbor in Petersburg and got on a schooner known as the Keziah. This ship was captained by William Bayliss. Bayliss had two other brothers who had also been ship's captains, and William, like his brothers, had been known to not only take the cargo that they were supposed to take from Virginia north, but also taking people who were seeking their own destinies in freedom. The ship, the Keziah, suddenly left the harbor when the wind was facing eastward, making it much more difficult to get down the Appomattox River and then ultimately the James River. The Keziah ran aground. Eventually, the ship is able to get back out into the waters, and the group of five, with William Bayliss as captain and his shipmate, Joseph Simpkins, will continue on down the James River. By this point, it is Sunday when everyone realizes that the enslaved people that they are looking for are not present. The scene behind me is very spring-like, calm and peaceful. It would have been a much different space in May of 1858, when the schooner Keziah had finally made its way from being trapped in sand on the Appomattox River here to City Point on May 31st, 1858. The ship would have passed from this direction, coming up the Appomattox River. Here, the Appomattox River meets with the James River, a river that had once brought people from the coast of Africa into Virginia and placed them in perpetual bondage, was now being usurped by Gilbert, Sarah, Joseph Mayo, John Bull, and William, as they made their way underneath the deck of the ship down the James River, heading east. The goal was for them to be able to get out of Virginia and get to Delaware. There, they would disembark and go elsewhere to start their new lives. While several of these people knew exactly where they were going, like John Bull, who planned to go work in a hotel in St. Catharines, Canada, and like Joseph Mayo, whose wife Harriet had escaped from slavery in 1858 from Petersburg and was living in New York City and awaiting her husband. We are not sure where Sarah Caldwell's husband William planned to go. Nevertheless, 26 miles downriver from here, the Keziah was stopped on May 31st, 1858, and towed back to Petersburg, coming right back through here. It was a Monday, which is an important day in the world of Sarah Caldwell, who worked here on Richard Eppes' plantation as a laundress. The laundry started on a Monday. Undoubtedly, she must have seen the Keziah as it headed toward Norfolk to the east, and then hours later back past here toward Petersburg. We are unsure if she had been told by William that he was going to flee from bondage, to find his own way in a life of freedom, and perhaps try to find a way to get her and their daughter Elnora away. The Keziah is stopped 26 miles downshore in the James River from City Point, now Hopewell, Virginia, where we are. It is towed back to Petersburg, and there the 5 people who had been found on board are going to be jailed. A mob of about 2,000 will attack the ship's captain and the shipmate. Police are able to put them in jail. A trial will ensue. And there, in 1858, in June, William Bayless will be sentenced to 40 years in the Virginia State Penitentiary. We are not sure what happened to William after he was captured. Sarah is rarely mentioned by Richard Eppes, her work being so gendered that Richard probably paid little attention to it. But he did note in September of 1858, writing Sarah and her daughter a pass to go visit, as he said, family in Petersburg. Was William there? Had the circumstances changed in their relationship? Did she even know that William was going to take off? Who supported her in the aftermath of William's failed attempt to escape? There are more questions than answers, but sometimes a little extra research will pay off. The work continues to try to document what happened to William. What was his last name? Where did he end up? Did he get to realize his freedom with Sarah and Elnora? You must ask yourself, what does freedom mean to you? And what did freedom mean to people who legally had never had it? The answers may be similar, but there is a stark difference. We in the National Park Service are ready and able to tell these stories through our research and the sites that we preserve. We look forward to welcoming you here to Petersburg National Battlefield to explore these and more stories about America's national history. Amanda, I'm going to send it back to you.
Thank you, Emmanuel, for taking the time to share the story of the Keziah incident. We look forward to your continued research and hope that we do have the opportunity to learn more about Sarah and William. As for the rest of you, we look forward to seeing you next time right back here at the Ranger Roadshow.